The improving sentence questions aren't easy. So let's see if we can go a little bit beyond the basics and learn a few strategies to help boost your score just a little tiny bit. First, let's start with grammar. I always avoid talking about grammar in these lessons, but for just a minute, I need you to indulge me, and simply because passive voice is the single most tested topic in the improving sentence questions. So you have to have an understanding of what that means. I guarantee you'll see a passive voice question, or two, or maybe three, in the 25 that you get on the SAT. So what is passive voice? Simple. Let's talk about its opposite first, active voice. Active voice is basically just when a sentence, when a subject does the action. Okay, my dog ate a bunch of grass. Well, who did it? My dog. You immediately know who did the action of that sentence. The dog. No question. Well, passive voice occurs when the subject is identified late in that sentence, or sometimes even not at all. So a bunch of grass was eaten by my dog. Well, it took a long time to get to who ate the bunch of grass. A bunch of grass was eaten by my dog. Well, if the subject is that late in the sentence, it gets to be a little bit confusing, a little bit wordy. Writers avoid that because it's kind of awkward. That's passive voice. So how do you know you're dealing with passive voice? Here's what you look for. You look for is, are, was, were, all the versions of the verb to be. You look for the word by, and you look for a subject at the end of a sentence, or even missing entirely from a sentence. So if the person or entity committing the action appears only at the end of the sentence or doesn't appear at all, you've got passive voice. Okay? Now take a look. I'll show you what it looks like in action here. Here we see passive voice pretty obviously. Okay? After Timmy dropped his filthy socks in the hamper, the offensive garment was washed by his long-suffering father. You can look through the answer choices if you want to pause this, but let's start here. You've got the word was, which is a form of to be. You've got the word by, and you've got the subject of the sentence, father, at the very end. You've got all three. This is clearly a case of passive voice. And again, when we know it's obviously passive voice, we know there's obviously a mistake, we're going to eliminate the first choice, which in this case is A. And again, if you want to go through this in detail, you certainly can. Just pause the video. But basically, only B and E actually solve the idea of this passive voice. But E is very wordy. It's very redundant, actually. And again, what we talked about in lesson 1 holds true. If you're choosing, choose the shortest choice. Okay, and B is clearly shorter than E, so here, this is your correct answer. Okay? Next, let's talk about the concept of a modifying phrase, especially when it starts a sentence. Okay, and these are what modifying phrases are. While walking through the woods, comma, then you have the rest of the sentence. A famous painter for most of his life, comma, and then a sentence. These are phrases that get tacked on to the beginning of a sentence to add a little bit of detail, to embellish a point, but they're not imperative to the sentence. The sentence can work without them. That's what a modifying phrase is. When you see things like that to start the sentence, you know that there's usually going to be an issue here. Okay, now take a look again at these examples. So while walking through the woods, what follows that comma is most likely going to be whoever was walking through the woods. In the second, a famous painter for most of his life, most likely what's going to immediately follow that is the name of a famous painter. So what's the point here? These modifying phrases have to immediately be followed by the noun. Okay? If the word that follows the comma in the modifying phrase here, right here, if that word isn't a noun, then you've got the incorrect choice. Okay? You know that the sentence is wrong if that's part of the sentence, or you know the answer choice is wrong if it's in the answer choice. Again, let's take a look. I'll show you. While walking through the woods, the foliage seemed beautiful to Humphrey. Well, Humphrey is the subject of that sentence. What it should say is, while walking through the woods, Humphrey thought the foliage was beautiful. Something like that. Then you don't have an issue. But because the subject of the sentence doesn't immediately follow, you have a mistake here. You have an issue. And that simply means that you've got a problem. You've got a sentence you need to improve. Okay? Now, answer choices. This is all about choosing the best version of a sentence. So, for example, if choice C fixes an error that you found in the original sentence, you then have to compare choice C to all the other answer choices. And maybe that C and E both fix that error, but E does so more concisely, more short, or shorter. So then you want to have E. So again, you can't just assume that you've got the correct choice here. So again, look, if multiple answer choices fix the errors, choose the shortest option. Next, eliminate answer choices that contain new errors. This is kind of common sense here, but a lot of people don't realize that. If we've already decided that there's an error in the sentence, you've already eliminated choice A. Well, now then you want to look at all the other answer choices, again, always starting with the shortest. But if you see that that choice has a new error in it, eliminate that one too. And what you'll find as you get good at this, you'll realize you're eliminating many choices from these improving sentence questions, much more so than any other section on the SAT. So keep this idea in mind. Now last, you want to eliminate choices that repeat the same error that you've already identified. Now again, this seems like common sense, but trust me when I tell you, a lot of people just assume that if the error is fixed once, that it must be fixed every time in that same sentence. But a lot of times what they'll do is make that same mistake in a different way later on in that underlined portion. Okay, so keep these three things in mind. They will greatly help you in reducing the number of choices you have, especially when you're guessing. I hate to tell you to do this, but you might want to memorize this sort of idea here. These are bad phrases. These are expressions that, when we write them formally, generally are going to be grammatically incorrect. Look at being, having been. These things create passive voice. Is, because, are, because. There's going to be disagreement there. And the phrase because of, and any word that ends in ing. Because of going away. Because of being mad. Any word that ends in ing, if it's next to because of, it's going to be grammatically wrong. If you can remember those things, again, you'll be eliminating choices left and right here. Now, you want to use the good parts of the sentence too, the parts of the sentence that aren't underlined. Now, some of them, the whole sentence will be underlined. There's not much you can do here. But in the majority, not the entire sentence will be underlined. So you can use that good portion to help you look at the bad portion. Okay? Because then the part that isn't underlined, it can't be changed. So if an underlined verb and a non-underlined verb are talking about the same thing, the same time period, for example, the underlined verb is in the future tense, while the non-underlined verb is in the past tense, you can be sure that the non-underlined verb is the right one. So that means that you're going to have to go look through the answer choices for the one that has the same tense as the non-underlined verb. So again, you do that for any part of speech, but use this to your advantage. Verb tense changes, singular plural shifting, pronoun agreements, these are the concepts that we talked about in the identifying sentence errors questions. So again, go back and take a look at those lessons if you're unsure, but remember, if it's correct in the non-underlined portion, then that's what you're going to have to look for in your answer choices as well. Okay? Now, last thing, but also probably the easiest thing. Remember correlative conjunctions. Ha, I'm just kidding. You don't have to remember what a correlative conjunction is. Okay? If you're good with grammar, hey, go for it. But basically all you need to know is the pairs of connecting words. Words that have to go together. You know this. You know these two. You've been told these two constantly. Either and or always go together. Neither and nor always go together. But look at these. Between, and, both, and, at once, and. These are ones that, while you may recognize them easily when you see them, you may not also recognize when they don't happen together. So be very careful. Remember, just so must, or just as must have so. Not must have but. Not only has to have but also. Whether has to have or. Remember that these combinations are just as important as either or and neither nor, the ones that you know well. Those combinations have to go together. So again, what you'll often see on the test is these particular ones messed up. You'll say between or. You'll see not and. You'll see other ones that just don't go together well. So remember, they have to be paired correctly together. Now, there's tons of examples out there and all the practice sets. Too many to go through now. But again, go through as many as you can. And remember these things. Use these little tricks. Because trust me, they're the things that are going to help improve your score. One sentence at a time. One raw point at a time. Good luck.